And we're going to go live in 3, 2, 1. All right. Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Multiverse Show, episode 9 of season 5. Thank you guys for tuning in. This is the long-awaited SpoilerCast. Nothing much really important happened in the gaming sphere. I mean, honestly, most of it could be summed up by PlayStation bought stuff last week, but nothing extremely important. Like, they bought Evo, which is a fighting game championship, so that's cool. Not much to say on that specifically. They're working with a new studio called Haven. Don't know anything about that particularly, but it was mostly small stuff like that. So we're not really covering that this week. We're covering the entertainment sphere because we have things coming out the wazoo here. We got WandaVision has finally concluded. We gave everybody a little bit of time so they can actually get to that and finally watch it. So we are going into a full spoiler cast for WandaVision, but we are saving that for the end of the show because we got a couple small things we want to talk on. We want to do our first impressions, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and then we also want to talk about the Snyder Cut, which released last week. So first off, got our introductions. We have the Baron of Britain, the Caesar of Cinema, Mr. James Wilson.
Hello, everybody. Pleasure to be here, and for something that I can talk about in nearly every topic. What a miracle of a day this is. Pleasure to be here as always. Happy to talk about WandaVision and finally dive deep into all of the weird things.
All right. We also have the megaphone Mike, the Donna Deletion, Mr. Mike Peter Truth, gracing us with his presence this evening.
Yo, what's going on, everybody? It's Mike. Great to be back here again on a Monday night. Past few Mondays have been crazy, but it always feels good to come back on this show. As always, we have a great docket of topics planned for everybody tonight, so let's get it started.
And we also have the White Wolf, Mr. Samuel Tolbert. How are you doing today, sir?
I am doing really well. This is a little strange, not having a lot of gaming stuff to talk about, but that's okay because I have big things to say about, well, at least 2 of these topics. So let's get it started.
All right. But first off, we ask the immortal question we ask every single week. What have you guys been playing? Mike, you've been gone the longest. What have you been playing, sir?
So in addition to my usual rotation of Black Ops Cold War and Animal Crossing New Horizons, I actually did restart Dishonored Definitive Edition. This was a game that I played when it first came out, and I never finished it. It's not that I dislike the game, but you guys know how I typically am with stealth games, and I felt that in certain ways, the game was actually too punitive with regards to not taking the stealthy approach. So I kind of put it down, but I did restart it again. I'm very early in the game, and I'm trying to play it the way that they intended and being stealthy as best as I can. So I am enjoying it. Like I said, I'm very early, and I do plan on finishing it this go around and then starting Dishonored 2. So that's what's been in my rotation as of late.
Nice. All right, James, what have you been playing, sir?
Nothing crazy new. I'm continuing my Bloodborne run, trying to get it down to the platinum. Tomorrow is the 6-year anniversary of the release of Bloodborne, and I'm not going to be able to get the platinum on the anniversary as I planned. But it's just having spent the last few weeks going through the detail, and it's I already said it's my favorite game of all time and my game of the generation. It's just cemented it. I could live inside of Yharnam. I adore everything about it, and I almost I don't want a Bloodborne 2. I want it to be a one and done. And that's it. That's all the stuff.
All right.
No other games other than the usual, every now and then a couple games of Apex.
Yeah. All right, not bad. And Sam?
Yeah, so a couple of things. First off, I played the second DLC for Doom Eternal, The Ancient Gods Part 2. I don't want to spoil it. It's awesome. It's absolutely awesome, and it is, interestingly enough, the conclusion to the Doom saga. Doesn't mean that it is done with Doom. Like, they've said they're going to make more Doom games, but it is the finale to the mini-series, if you will, that started with Doom 2016. This is the Slayer's finale. and it is awesome. The final fight is something incredible. The backdrop, everything. You get an incredible new ability with like a hammer to stun hordes of demons at the same time. It's awesome. So I've actually got a full review. If you want some written thoughts, you can check that out on Windows Central tomorrow. It's really great. And the other game I played is actually the one that our guest last week was working on, and that's Adios. I finished that up, grabbed it when it came out. Very short game. He talked a ton about it, so I don't want to say too much except to say it's fantastic. Well done, Doc. The work paid off. Well done indeed. We might have to do like a mini spoiler cast on that one a couple of weeks out from now. Maybe get him back on something.
I'll wait a little bit. I want to give people a chance to digest it, like you said.
Right. No, it is. And that's why I'm not saying anything else. It's like there's basically nothing I can say that doesn't give something away. And you need to go in on it as blind as possible.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really annoyed that I'm not in a position to play this game because from what people have been saying, it sounds like something that I would love.
James, you more than anyone here, you more than me probably would love this. And I can say this. I can say this without giving anything away. The writing and like voice acting punches well above its weight. Mm-hmm. Like there are AAA games that dream they had this kind of voice direction in the intonations and the way people are talking with each other.
Did you get the feeling at all when you were playing Adios? Because I definitely got this impression that there are some graphical limitations due to budget, obviously, but
of course.
I just kept imagining like a huge budget and like how good it would look with the voice acting. Like the voice acting definitely catapults it beyond what you would imagine it to look like.
Oh yeah,
it's amazing to me. I liked it a lot. Although yeah, I played Adios as well. I have not finished it yet. I got really depressed like halfway through it, so it's like I need to stop. But I had to stop playing it. But I plan to finish it this week because I got a lot of free time. I'm on vacation currently. So yeah, I played a little bit of Doom Eternal. Didn't really get into the second DLC. I'm still finishing the first one. I've been playing a lot of Rainbow Six Siege with the Flores operator. We did actually a game night last night. So we did it on Xbox with Lord Cognito, Italian Clowns for 4 Guys with Quarters. It was a lot of fun. We had a blast. Literally with Flores. But I also started Dante's Inferno. Holy crap! Why did no one tell me how messed up that game is? You guys play Dante's Inferno at all?
I thought you were talking about the book. Sorry.
Well, I mean, I've read the book. I know the details of it, but I mean, there was a game that came out in 2010 from EA with Visceral.
Yeah.
And holy crap, it is disturbing. Anybody else play this game? Yes, no?
I played parts of it. I played part. I think there was like a demo at one point or something. Like I saw a lot of it. I've seen a lot of it. It's basically, I mean, dude, keep in mind, it's the same studio that made Dead Space.
Yeah.
And they were allowed to. They're like, hey, do an edgy interpretation of hell. Like there's some messed up stuff in there.
I'm only gonna say one particular boss. It's like the second or third boss that you fight. It's whenever you get to the lust level of hell. I think it's the second ring. So you're fighting this is the Queen of Assyria who had like seduced Caesar, but it's a long thing. So she's like a giant half naked woman who's like climbing this pillar in between a tornado, and you're climbing up it. And during like some of the fight scene encounters that you have with her, she has souls of unborn children who were unbaptized who have knives for arms crawling out of her nipple, and she grabs them and throws them on the stage. I'm like, what?
Nice.
Oh my gosh. Like it I couldn't believe it, but it's you definitely get the Dead Space vibe from it, but it's so it does not care about any sensibilities. It will go for that heart-wrenching, gut-busting kind of horror, but it's really good. I enjoyed it. So we're gonna, I guess, after that, I mean, we're getting the topics here. So out of the panel here, we're gonna talk about Falcon and the Winter Soldier first. Out of the panel here, who has seen the first episode of Falcon and Winter Soldier?
Yep.
Yep, you saw it. Mike, did you see it at all?
I have not.
You have not. I have, and Sam, I don't think you have, right?
That's correct. I have not. Yep.
Okay, so we're not going to really spoil anything about it. We're going to tell you right now that there's really not anything to spoil on this one. It's largely a setup episode. But James, kick us off here. What was your impressions on this first episode?
Yeah. So, just for the people who don't know, if there are any of you, if you're listening to this kind of show, this is the Falcon and Winter Soldier following Bucky Barnes and Sam Wilson after the events of Avengers Endgame. This was supposed to be the first of the Disney Plus shows, and that's quite obvious by the fact that it is very safe as an opening episode. And I don't mean, when I say safe, I don't mean boring. I mean, it's, when you say Falcon and the Winter Soldier, you think, oh, it's going to be like a Captain America movie. It's like a Captain America movie, and that's a good thing. It is very much an MCU paint by numbers opening act where they have set up some funny things, the stakes, and one little villain thread that will be expanded upon in the next hour to 2 hours of television time. It is a very, very serviceable pilot, as is Sam Wilson. Hey. The show has a great opening action scene. It's just a really, really good action scene. I thought the episode was good. I thought it was good. We have been a bit spoiled by just how good the opening of WandaVision was, and I think we were expecting something akin to that would change how we perceived these characters and see something that might mess with the form of television. But this is a lot more normal, a lot more accessible, and probably if you were trying to get to someone to watch any of either this or WandaVision, this would be an easier sell.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's about right. So spoilers for Endgame. So Captain America kind of retires and hands the shield over to Sam in particular. And so this kind of show is more of like, at least thematically, is more about legacy and about who kind of picks up the mantle of Captain America in that wake. James had mentioned, it's the first action scene with Sam is great. You kind of have him living in this, I guess maybe denial's not the right word for it necessarily, but he doesn't want to accept the mantle of Captain America because he largely believes that Steve Rogers was only Captain America, so he's kind of like reluctantly doing things in that regard. Bucky's kind of living the repercussions of being Winter Soldier, which I kind of vibed with a little more. Where it's like, hey, I've worked for Hydra for decades, and I caused a lot of pain and suffering, and he's kind of more devoted towards fixing that, and then also like atoning for certain sins. Like the first episode is largely about like him hanging out with the father of a guy that he killed, and trying to come to like have the strength to tell him that he was the one who killed his son, but it's not. It's a very touchy subject matter there. Um, Other than that, you don't get a lot of ideas in terms of where the story's going. They kind of set up a couple different things, like they introduce the Flag Smashers as like a cult as opposed to a person per se. They do little things like that. There's not a ton of Easter eggs, honestly, at least for Marvel fans. But this is again more set up than anything else. Um, I only thing I want to bring up, and this is not really a spoiler because they showed this in the trailers a lot. Um, they show off a terrible first impression picture of U.S. Agent. Oh
Oh
my
yeah,
god, he looks so bad. His nose
he
looks
looks
so
very
huge,
goofy.
his ears are sticking out the side, and it looks so bad.
It looks like a bad Captain America costume,
Yeah,
like a bad Halloween costume.
yeah. That was not good. Like I can imagine Kurt Russell's just sitting there like, how could you do my boy like this? His first time in the MCU and he looks terrible. Because his son Wyatt Russell,
Wyatt.
yeah, Wyatt. Yeah, I always think that's wrong. but his son Wyatt Russell is playing his was it the new Captain America, aka U.S. Agent. So they don't really
Well, he's
show
not
anything
US
about
agent
it.
yet.
Yeah, well, he maybe, I don't know, but they haven't really said if he's Captain America, but they said he's taking a mantle of sorts. But it's
Mhm.
it's kind of a weird thing, and that opens a whole can of worms for the MCU, which I'm not going to talk about because I think they're going to go into that in the show. But for me, it was kind of like a solid like 6.5 to 7 out of 10 because it's mostly just set up, but you don't really get a lot of idea of what's going to happen. But
Yeah, the comparison that I have to it, and this is going to sound worse than what I mean. This episode felt more like the Netflix Marvel shows, in the sense that it's a little bit slower paced than you think it's going to be. The episode is, I think, something like 42 minutes long.
Yeah.
And that is a decent chunk of television. That is an episode of Breaking Bad, Like, that's an episode of normal network out. That is a network hour. That's a lot to get in when you don't have ad breaks breaking it up. And I'm not saying that Marvel can't fill a 45-minute show. Of course they can. But this episode, it led a lot. It made me think that this show is going to be a lot slower paced than we might have suspected, which is weird because this is only 6 episodes compared to WandaVision's 9. However, I reckon I'm wrong, and in about episode 3 or 4, it's going to radically pick up. I would really like one of like the Daredevil action scenes where Bucky just wrecks some fools. I really want that. Just put the camera, don't move it, and just let them fight.
Yeah, and like at least when it comes to Falcon, at least in terms of that one, his fight scene was like perfect. Like his action scene was great. You definitely get the impression of like this is his element. He's going to dominate, and he is a badass. Like it was great. They didn't really give Bucky that kind of shine per se, but he does. They gave Sam a lot of a lot of good action scenes to go with. But yeah, I think we'll stop it there and go into the Snyder Cut, which I haven't seen, but Sam has seen. Mike, did you get a chance to watch the Snyder Cut?
I would just like to.
Oh,
no,
very quickly.
I did not, but I did have a couple questions about it.
Sure.
I would just like to say very, very quickly before we do Snyder Cut, just a very brief bit of movie news that dropped earlier today that is a bit promising, pun intended. So the writer and director of Promising Young Woman, which is a big Oscar contender this year, Emerald Fennell, it's her first film, by the way, I mentioned it before. She has been commissioned to write a movie for the DCEU. She's writing the Zatanna movie. Now, for those of you who know Zatanna, yes, now someone knows who Zatanna is. Zatanna is one of the very few DC heroes that I actually know about that isn't one of the core members of the Justice League. Zatanna is a magician and a really quite powerful sorceress. She has done stuff with Justice League and Justice League Dark. Most of her storylines interactions have been with like Batman and Constantine. But yeah. She's a cool character, and so that was just a brief piece of news. Let's get into the Snyder Cut.
All right. So
thank you for sharing that. I'm really glad you
Sam
shared that because I know a lot of people aren't, but I'm also a Zatanna fan, James. So that is good news to hear.
So we're gonna let Sam go into talking about the Snyder Cut, and we're gonna let Mike ask a bunch of questions because there's something he does care about. So, Sam, can you give us the rundown here? Why should we watch the Snyder Cut for Justice League?
You should. It's because it's not an extended cut. I went into this thinking, okay, I'm going to get some extra scenes. Some CGI is going to be better. It'll probably be a slightly better movie. Like that was not. I want to be very clear about this. I was never one of these hashtag give us the Snyder Cut people. I was just like, I learned about the situation. I was like, yeah, it sucks, but I don't want to be part of a toxic fan base or anything. Like. And so when it happened, I'm like, look, I'll watch it guilt-free because I'm happy he gets to do his thing. All right. Everyone who has ever worked with Snyder talks about him like, yeah, he's a great guy. He's actually good to work with. Unlike the stories Ray Fisher has shared about some certain WB executives and the allegations therein, not to mention all the allegations that have come out about Joss Whedon and everything there. I don't want to go too far into that, but that is a big thing hanging over that, and it's relevant to what I'm about to say next. This is not an extended cut of a film. This is not a Lord of the Rings extended cut. This is not even like Kingdom of Heaven extended cut, and that's a pretty big difference if you've ever seen the extended cut of Kingdom of Heaven. Like, you know what I'm talking about, James. This is more than that. This is, about 50 minutes of the film are the same, and it shares the same skull and feet, but otherwise it's actually a completely different film. Cyborg is the heart of this movie. The character that, barely got any recognition, that I think says booyah one time, and that's just all there is to it. He's the main character. Not Batman, not Superman, not Wonder Woman. Flash and what he gets to do and how he ends up saving the team, and his role is just incredible. Like, there is so much more emotion and depth and heart given to everyone in the cast. And that lends so much more credence to what Ray Fisher has talked about on social media regarding the different allegations and all that. So I don't want to go too far into a lot of this stuff because there are legitimate spoilers, because there's some stuff that is very, very, very different from the 2017 theatrical cut. Justice, I guess, is what people are calling it now. But Mike, I know you have some questions, so I wanted to make myself available to answer those questions.
Absolutely. So I haven't had a chance to watch it yet, but it is something that I do plan on watching. I'm very interested in it. The theatrical release of Justice League, it's something that I thought was, I didn't hate it as passionately as a lot of people did. I thought in general that the original theatrical release was just fine for what it was. You know what I mean? But I'm going to flesh out some of the backstories in this one. So 3 questions that come to mind. They made a lot back in this as Joker. In Suicide Squad, he was in it for, I think, all of 8 minutes, and I didn't really think he had enough of the Joker character in that movie. Does his Joker actually get time in this movie?
So it's a 2-part question, basically. So the first thing is, he's only in one scene. It is a long scene, but it's only one scene, to be clear. The second thing is, I think this scene is probably the best Joker work Jared Leto has done, but I also think that's a bar that is incredibly low, if that makes any sense. I don't think that's a very high mark, but this is probably the most I've liked him as the Joker.
Okay, that's fair enough. Second question that I had. How much does the 4:3 aspect ratio affect the presentation of the film? Because that was something that a lot of people were making a big deal about when it first came out.
Wait, hold on, God, I'm saying, is it actually in 4:3? I thought that was a joke.
No, it is in 4:3, James. It is in 4:3.
All right, okay.
I know, fine. I was surprised by that.
I was very surprised too. Mike, it's one of those things that's like, people get so up in arms about it one way or another. I can take it or leave it. It's fine. Like, basically what the result is like, you don't notice the black bars on the side after a while. Like, it's fine. It's, your eyes get glued to the actual screen where things are happening. It results in, I will say, some of the characters being taller. So it's this weird effect, and weird is the wrong word. It's an interesting effect. The focus isn't on, the backdrop of a big battle going on. It's, Steppenwolf is standing there and you see him imposing because you see him head to toe. So I think it's just a framing choice. I think it's just, this is the way Snyder wanted to frame the characters, and I think there's probably advantages and disadvantages to both approaches. I can take it or leave it.
Okay, fair enough. So last thing that I had, this is actually a 2-part question. It's no secret that it's a very long film, a little over 4 hours of runtime. Did you watch?
I watched the first hour, then the second hour, then the final 2 hours. But you can actually break it up further than that, because the film is actually divided into 6 chapters and an epilogue. So 7 chapters. Like, it'll come on screen and say part 1, part 2, part 5, part 6. So if you have a low attention span, that's actually probably a good way to break it up. Is just take a stretch when those parts come up, and there's a transition with a black screen and everything, so it'll tell you when to pause or whatever.
Cool. That was all I had. Thank you.
Yeah, I can't emphasize this,
especially since in the UK, since HBO Max does not exist in this country, you have to sign up to it's not even like you can rent the film on its own. You have to sign up to a special service that's part of Sky, which is the same company as Fox, which is a TV network, and like you've got to go jump through a bunch of hoops to actually watch it. And I'm absolutely not doing that.
Mhm.
I wouldn't do that if I wanted to watch the film. I wouldn't pay upwards of 20 English pounds to watch this film. Absolutely not. But yeah. So yeah, that's my position. And you know what? If it's great and you love it, fine. They're not going to make any more of it. You can just let this be its weird historical artifact of what might have been this 4-hour movie that would have, if he came in. And here's the other thing. I've seen people online going, "Oh, this film would have done great in cinemas." Bullshit! It would have done great in cinemas. You cannot release a 4-hour movie into cinemas. Can't be done.
I will back you up on that. I will back you up on that, James. Like, they couldn't have released this any other way. Maybe a 3-hour cut. Maybe
there is absolutely maybe, and like you would have to do a lot of work to get people into the cinema to watch that. Like, there's a reason why only 2 Avengers films have even.
That's totally fair.
The question I always ask about this particular scenario, because it is such a weird thing, so the question I ask is, I know I'm asking you to answer the same question again, Sam. Is there a way you think that Snyder could have conveyed the same film in 2.5 hours?
2.5, no. Not a chance in hell. 3 hours, maybe. I think maybe there is a way you could get this down into 3 hours. It would still, frankly, involve cutting some interesting stuff or some buildup. But like, I think a 3-hour cut could have worked. And that is my issue. Like, I don't want to harp on this too long because we need to get to the meat of this show, which is the WandaVision SpoilerCast. But I will say this as my final remark. It's not like they just pieced together the theatrical out of what Snyder had. They went back and shot extra stuff. The whole thing with the Russian family was Joss's, and like people on set have like reported through Variety like they hated it. They hated everything he was doing. And like, so it's not like the budget ran out, y'all. It's not like they were just piecing things together. They threw everything out and then essentially started over halfway. That's kind of my issue. I understand and sympathize that they needed a shorter version of this film to exist. I do not sympathize looking at what they do with some of these characters, especially Cyborg, and throwing all of that out for him pushing a Russian family out of town. I do not sympathize at all. That's kind of my issue here.
I mean, based on what people have said about this movie, and with it, because I have seen every other DCEU movie, for me, the roadmap to releasing this movie in cinemas seemed, now with the benefit of hindsight and this movie existing, is very, very clear. It's Man of Steel, Wonder Woman, Aquaman, Batman vs Superman, a 1-hour TV special on Cyborg, and then 2 Justice League movies. That's it.
I can see that.
Oh, and Suicide Squad somewhere. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So anyway, the Snyder cut is going to be interesting to see if this kind of thing catches on, I guess. It turns into like a, hey, we do this on a regular.
I mean, Warner Brothers before the release of this said that Zack is not going to be involved in the DC films going forward, at least in a directing sense. I imagine he'll stay on as a producer or an executive producer. And earlier today, they doubled down and said, we are not developing anything on this film.
Yeah. So, I mean,
that's that.
Because the thing you have to also keep in mind is like Aquaman broke $1 billion.
The most successful film of all time.
Yeah. Like the thing is there because right now the gold standard for them is Aquaman, because it's the only DC property that's broke $1 billion, which is kind of a weird alternate universe kind of take. But hey,
well, let's not forget that. Well, I was about to be like, oh, yeah, but Wonder Woman did really well. Then I remembered the sequel,
but not $1 billion. Well, like, so to them it's kind of like,
but it did actually make. It was more successful based on its budget to gross percentage.
Yeah. Fair enough. Fair enough. All right. So, anything else about Snyderverse before we move on to WandaVision? I'll take that as a no. All right. So we're gonna move on in terms of this, in terms of the stream right now. So I'm just saying is like I know there's been some things here, but I know if you rewatch it, it'll be perfectly fine. So yeah, like we're gonna go into WandaVision. So just as a heads up, if you guys have not finished WandaVision, which we gave everybody plenty of time to finish, you can leave now and come back to the show whenever you finish, you catch up there. Or if you don't care about spoilers, we're gonna go right into spoilers. Um, everybody got a chance?
Yeah, I'm gonna bounce because I haven't seen it, so I really don't have
Right.
anything to contribute.
That's okay.
So I will catch you guys next week.
All right.
All right.
And where can
Take
people
care,
find
man.
you,
Good night,
Mike?
fellas.
I'm
Thank
watching
you.
WandaVision. Come on.
So, with Mike gone, we now have an opportunity to talk about WandaVision. So, real quick, we'll do just a very brief rundown of the show, I guess. The show takes place after a certain amount of time of after Endgame. It's after the 5-year blip. The show pretty much picks off like picks up in, like in this weird alternate TV reality where Wanda is basically omnipotent and can change anything about reality. But it's presented initially as like a mystery. You find out it's just a part of like a hex reality that she's created in this town called Westview, and it like each episode of time takes place in a different type of sitcom scenario. Real quick, I kind of want to just get your overall thoughts. James, let me know what did you think about WandaVision specifically as an overall show?
I thought WandaVision at times was one of the most inventive and creative things I've seen from a mainstream television show for a really long time. I thought what they were doing was, for the medium, was exciting. In like a really for like what the potential of what we can do with television going forward and streaming shows by engaging with their audience in a way that we haven't really seen on this scale. So my expectations were relatively high based on just how odd the trailers were. After the first 2 or 3 episodes, I was just hooked, and I want to use this show and The Mandalorian, and I want to thank Disney for making weekly television an important thing again. Binging is fun. There is nothing like the anticipation and the build-up and the waiting and watching of weekly television. Game of Thrones did it perfectly, as has done television since the 50s. And just because one red Netflix boy came along and started dropping 13 episodes in one go does not mean we should change the entire industry to fit one demographic. That aside, well done. I feel like the show ended not great. But we can get more specifically into that later. But as an overview, I think this is I think even with the pretty weak ending, I think the show is fantastic and easily one of my top 5 things in the MCU. Not even, it's just straight in there.
I agree.
Sam?
I'll just say very, very quickly. I think like it has its highs, it has its lows. The ending is just okay in my opinion. I don't hate it, but I don't love it either. I think inevitably after the week-to-week build-up, the ending wasn't going to satisfy completely. If that makes any sense. I think that
but also it is very. But yeah, it is very much on the creators. They deliberately misled people. And I'm not talking like, I expected one thing and they gave me another and now I'm mad. Like, no. They made calculates 2 things. And I did not expect the X-Men to show up. I'm one of those people. But you can't say things like, oh, I'm going to go talk to someone in the Air Force. I know a guy. You can't say that in a show like this, and then it be someone that we never met before, and someone of no consequence. That doesn't lie.
Yeah, there's definitely some things where it's like, okay, if this really wasn't meant to be anything, or in the case of Pietro, it was just a casting gag, like, what are you doing? Like, I'm definitely questioning it. But like, nonetheless, in spite of that, I will say, WandaVision is excellent. The way it is a love letter to the earlier episodes are a love letter to sitcoms, like the Dick Van Dyke Show, and Full House. I think just well done. There's some genuinely funny moments. The way this show understands and explores camera angles and what was possible in what decade is incredible. I loved it. The attention to detail there has been fantastic. And honestly, I appreciate, as much as the ending fails in other respects, I think one thing I appreciate is just this is a show about grief. That's it. This is a show literally dedicated to, hey, Wanda is not okay. She's not all right psychologically, and she is suffering in the grief and the turmoil and the emotions of everything she has lost, and what she will do to try and keep the artificial new thing that she has created to keep herself like mentally shielded from it. I just enjoyed that so much. I'm sure this is almost risking a tangent. I'm sure I'm going to get to a point where I want the next big MCU film, and I want the big climactic lead up, like, oh, what's the big crossover we're building to? I'm sure I'll get there eventually. The thing is, I went through Infinity War. I went through Endgame. I've had that moment for a while now. I'm going to be good. Let the MCU be weird. Even if everything didn't work, I want more stuff like WandaVision. Full stop.
And we're getting it. We're getting it because we've got Falcon now, but like, oh, very, very near on the horizon, we've got Loki, and that show looks bonkers.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I thought that a similar thing. WandaVision started off with a lot of promise, and I really enjoyed the first 2/3 of it. Towards the end, it just kind of felt like cop out, I guess. Like they teased, like James was saying, they teased a lot of stuff and gave nothing. And like sometimes it was like just to mislead people, like the situation with getting Evan Peters to play Pietro in this universe when he's known for being the X-Men, or rather in this case the Fox universe Quicksilver, and like talking about recasting him, and I thought that was okay as a funny joke, but I was expecting something
joke.
else.
It's such a good joke.
Yeah, I was expecting something else to kind of make up for it. Like you mentioned before, specifically said like, oh, I know like this space engineer, or I forgot the aerospace engineer, and it's like, okay, well, there's a bunch of people that could possibly be, and it's nobody. It's just some person, or like not even, like they don't even show you the person; they just show you someone else, and it just felt like it was an opportunity they intentionally chose not to take. And I understand maybe not to like outshine somebody else, but it needed something to keep people going. And like, okay, we'll go into the twist a little bit. So the villain of this show is Agatha Harkness, which I think was a good call, at least in terms of.
It was Agatha all along.
Yep.
But also it wasn't.
Yeah. That one I was kind of frustrated with specifically because they definitely teased so much more, because Agatha was never really like intended, at least in the comics, as a solo villain. It was more just kind of like an antagonist, but it wasn't. I wouldn't call her a villain per se. But this one, they just kind of make her a villain and like give no real hints or clues like who she's serving or anything like that at all. And I was just kind of like, well, okay.
Yes, but Ivan, don't you understand? She's an MCU villain. She's a Phase 1 MCU villain. She has to be the opposite of the hero.
Yeah.
And also, on that point, we have another Phase 1 MCU villain, the opposite of Vision, which is just Vision.
The Ship of Theseus conversation between the two was good, though. I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
There are some dialogue moments that if they weren't in an MCU movie, they would be talked about in film school. Are you fucking kidding me? What is love if not grief persevering?
Oh no,
That
what
is
no, what
Mad
is
and
grief
dumped
but
him.
love pierce for reading?
shocking.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, you got it backwards. So-
Oh, my apologies. But like, if that was from like a 1970s art house movie by Scorsese or a Shakespeare line, that would be heralded as one of the great lines of fiction. And I'm sort of annoyed that that conversation and that line got turned into a meme in like 5 minutes when you and you ended up having Paul Bettany on a late night show doing various jokes on it. I'm sort of pissed off
Yeah.
at that.
It was a great line. Yeah, you're right. I totally agree with that. Like this, it was kind of dumped on because it is an MCU movie, which kind of stinks. But yeah, I will say like I was
Yeah.
particularly peeved, at least with the Agatha thing, because they kind of eliminated most of the nuance of the character. They just like, oh, I'm just gonna relegate you to just a nosy neighbor, and that's it. And it's like, yeah, I just wanted power because I was misunderstood. And I was like, okay, like I could have dealt with you being the big bad of this show if you were a little more nuanced than that. But like I was one of the people who wanted Mephisto to be a part of it because Mephisto, oh boy. In the comics he's done a lot of shit. Like he really he's all over the place. But he's treated more like a timeline correction kind of thing. Like so Peter and Mary Jane got married in the comics, and Marvel has this thing about not rebooting their universe as long as possible. And so people did not like that Peter was married, specifically because there was no Chase anymore, and they felt like he was always supposed to be. The dynamic had changed; it wasn't interesting anymore. So then they get Mephisto to randomly show up, and he's like, "Peter, I can bring Aunt May back to life for you because she gets killed. I could bring her back to life, but it's gonna cost you your marriage." Nothing's
Yeah.
changed other than they just weren't married. It's just like, oh, like that doesn't seem like a deal the devil would make. Just it was an opportunity for them to introduce that and add another player into the larger scheme of things, but they didn't, and I felt like there was another missed opportunity. Like it felt to frame it a better way, and I'll stop talking for a little bit. Is I felt like the beginning of the show, the first 2/3, is they were opening up all these possibilities that all of a sudden they just cut and end it really quick. It's just like
Yeah,
really fast.
the last two episodes, and also, I screw you, Marvel and Kevin Feige for explicitly telling us the last two episodes will be an hour long, and they weren't. They weren't even a network hour. You can't just tell us that and then it's not the case. That's not cool. Yeah, I would have preferred it if there was less explaining of things. Because there was a lot of explaining of things by the end, and everything got wrapped up well. Considering that this story does not end here, it ends and goes on in the next Doctor Strange movie. I would have liked a more vague ending, which is a weird thing to want, but I think it would have done better. But we can't review the show that we wanted to watch. That's not fair.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that this show, it's like we're nitpicking right now, but because we like it. If we really didn't like it, we just wouldn't talk about it.
Exactly.
There are moments of the show which are like outstandingly brilliant. Like the adverts. To have those adverts in there, all of them are fantastic. The moment in the first show for me that gets me every time, that really cemented out I was really excited for this, was the dinner scene where they've done all of the sitcom things and they're sitting down, and without really much fanfare, the camera angles change.
Yep.
They've been static for the whole thing, and then they just change and zoom in, but the color grading is the same. And then it's just a sequence from a horror movie. You have the weird laughter over it. You have someone dying, and then Vision uses his powers, and then everything goes back to normal. And I was just thinking, if there is a moment like that in every episode, this is going to be one of the greatest shows of all time. And I'm not saying they dropped the ball, but I feel like they threw the ball and showing us this is where it's going to end. And then right at the end, it just massively went a different direction. It felt like the ending of Firewatch, you know?
Yep, I know what you mean. Yeah, I definitely could see that, where it's like, wow, all these possibilities, and oh, never mind, it was something simple.
Yeah.
And how are we gonna do the amazing final battle with the person who messes with people's minds? They're gonna throw CGI blobs at each other.
One thing I will say is, I think, obviously, because at the end of the show, Wanda has the Darkhold, right? She's alone, she's isolated, there's no longer any mental stability for her, and she's reading and learning through the Darkhold. I do think Mephisto, they're setting up some big stuff for Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness.
Oh yeah.
I think that's where we're going to see that kind of thing come.
They keep saying that Doctor Strange is a horror movie, and I'm really hesitant because those are big words.
Sure.
A PG-13 horror movie. I was like,
Yeah.
If it can't be scary, at least be weird.
So just kind of recap where things are. So you talked about White Vision, who shows up. So the one of the subplots that happens in this particular show is the military, specifically S.W.O.R.D., is very interested in trying to recreate Vision and to be directly under their control instead of it being an autonomous robot. So with him, so they basically set him up so the White Vision does exist in the comics, and he's somehow more powerful than Vision, but it's more he doesn't think as dynamically as Vision does, so Vision's able to normally kind of outmaneuver him normally. But White Vision, in this case, they have that the ship of Theseus thing, like you mentioned, where he kind of downloads his memories into White Vision before he is erased. So as far as I'm concerned, White Vision is Vision now, because they gave him all the memories, so it was kind of like a way to get him back in the MCU, but be a little different. So
Right.
it's kind of eliminating the weight aspect of his sacrifice in Infinity War. But that's how comics are. No one ever stays dead for long. So
And also at the same time, it's actually a clever way of keeping Paul Bettany around in it. Because while it is Vision, like, I do agree with you. Let me be very clear about this. That is now Vision. He has those memories. It's clearly not going to be the same. He's going to be grappling with how he isn't the same, how he literally died, and he will remember dying. He no longer has the Mind Stone, but he has the Chaos Magic, so his powers and abilities are going to be a little bit different now. And I do think there's some interesting ways you can grapple with that, is what I'm saying, that don't invalidate the weight of his sacrifice in Infinity War or him disappearing, from Wanda's world in WandaVision.
And on the topic of Paul Bettany, he is outstanding in this show.
Oh, excellent.
Moment to moment, the most consistent and the best thing in the show for me is Paul Bettany. I knew he was charismatic and conversationally funny. He is hysterical. If he had done a career as a comic actor, he'd be a sensation.
Mm-hmm.
Paul Bettany is so good in the show. Across the board, actually, there's no. I mean, the MCU doesn't have bad acting in it. You know what I mean? But across the board, Darcy Jennings never been more likable than in this. Darcy Lewis, I should say. Kat Dennings, the actress. Randall Park, Jimmy goddamn Woo.
Yep.
What a character! What a character they've got on their hands. There are not many civilians that are as charismatic in the MCU as Jimmy Woo, and now they've got him to play with for a bunch of stuff.
If they brought him on to do they talked about doing an MCU X-Files kind of thing. If they brought him on and he teams up with Kat Dennings, that would be about this. You want to bring up?
We haven't talked much about S.W.O.R.D. And their sort of rise out of nowhere to be the new big authority figure. I mean, do you think that's going to stick?
So S.W.O.R.D. in the comics was more about space.
Yeah.
S.W.O.R.D. in the comics was way more about space and well, Shield was more about threats on Earth, and SOAR was about extraterrestrial threats, and focusing more on that. And so they kind of changed it to the sentient weapons things. So I don't really know what they're gonna do with that. I assume they'll be around like in some capacity, but I think they're kind of like AIM in Iron Man 3. They're just kind of thrown away now. Like I just get that feeling out of it. Like they're
Yeah.
around, but they're very
man-
much in passing.
Yeah, and on the topic of Sword and Monica Rambeau, who was a lovely character in the show, they're setting up Secret Wars, right? That looks like the big thing that's coming.
I'm inclined to
Maybe.
agree. I'm inclined to agree.
It could be Secret Wars because they're talking about the Skrulls in particular, and when the Skrulls get
Yeah.
involved, it's normally something like that.
They've done 3 post-credit stings directly involving Nick Fury, the Skrulls, and In Space. This is like there's 2 in Spider-Man, and now this one. That is not a coincidence. It can't be.
They may be trying to do like the Man on the Wall arc, but that's if they're trying to get rid of Nick Fury personally. So okay, because they already introduced Sword. This is just a random little thing. I get that kind of feeling that Samuel Jackson kind of wants out because he doesn't show up very much anymore. But so here's the thing.
I mean, you say that, and he was all over the place in Homecoming, in Far From Home.
Yeah, but it's more after that. Like I just don't get the feeling he's going to be around very long. And so the one thing they've never talked about is life model decoys, at least in terms of the MCU itself. I think they've mentioned it on Agents of Shield, but not very much. So the concept of Man on the Wall is that like once a generation they pick one person to single-handedly manipulate the universe and try to protect Earth. And Nick Fury was that choice. And so every single version of Nick Fury you've ever seen was never the real one and simply just some guy. It's a life model decoy of him. And I get that feeling that they may be trying to do something like that. And they go Secret Wars may be the kind of like venue for it. But I just get this feeling specifically where Fury's kind of taken this weirder position in the MCU since then, where he's now not so much more interested in Earth, but it's more extraterrestrial threats than usual. Because again, they could change the MCU at their will, but I just have a sneaking suspicion they might be trying to do Man on the Wall, and make actually Nick Fury kind of the new villain. Because I mean, where do you go after Thanos as a villain? Where do you go?
That goes back to the problem we've talked about beforehand, is that like in terms of scale, Infinity War and Endgame was the 1-2 punch of all time, right? Like that's as big as it gets scale wise. So I personally, and this is literally just a personal thing, I don't know. One, that's why I want them to just do a lot of weird stuff like WandaVision, because I think it works right now as they're figuring themselves out. 2, I wouldn't be surprised if it's not let's do this big 10-year grand arc, but like let's do lots of these 3 to 4 year arcs, if that makes any sense.
I think
like lots of big, smaller stuff, but none of it quite reaching the heights of Infinity or Endgame, but at a more frequent rate. I think that's what
I would love to believe that they're going to do that, but you know, the mouse wants that cash, man.
Yeah. I know, but also times are changing. Theaters may be coming back, but they're not going to be what they were. And you have to keep that in mind as well here.
I mean, are we certain about that? The last time we had a major pandemic like this, we created lots of ways to squish our bodies close to each other. Does nobody else remember the 20s? Or am I the only immortal one here?
Always you.
I mean...
like, the theaters, as we know it, were created in that decade.
They were, but also, dude, it's just home... I don't know. Home entertainment has changed things. That's where I'm sitting at right now. Yeah, it's probably a conversation we should have another time in terms of like the fallout of everything that has happened here. But I don't believe we can quite go back to the way things work. Like Disney just greenlit how many Star Wars shows, not movies, shows specifically for Disney Plus, and buffing that up.
But I would chalk that up mostly to the fact that Star Wars films have been underperforming.
Fair.
But Star Wars TV shows have been overperforming, whereas Marvel are just overperforming everywhere.
Yeah.
True, but also, what are the next Marvel films up? Black Widow and Eternals?
Yeah. Well, I legally cannot say anything about Eternals. Maybe. I literally can't say anything about Eternals because that's what happened with Guardians of the Galaxy. Like, it was like, who?
Okay,
I mean, Eternals...
Fair.
I mean, the thing about Eternals for me that is like the most interesting thing is that it's probably going to have an Oscar-winning director behind it. I mean, the film's, I assume, done, right? Yeah, it's got to be done because it was. Yeah, but like the Marvel and Disney get to say from the Oscar-winning director of blah blah blah. Here comes the Eternals. Like that will sell it to people who probably don't watch a lot of Marvel stuff. You know, Eternals might be a way to get people in. It is a bit of a weird project. Yeah. I think having Eternals and a Spider-Man film, and also let's not forget that Avatar 2 is on the horizon. It is coming out. Those three things within like a 3-month period of each other at the end of this year, that will revitalize the movie industry. And by 2022, everything will be back to normal in movies. I'm serious.
Bookmark. All right, this is one to bookmark, y'all. This is one to bookmark. Yeah. We'll see. I hope you're right, James.
Of all entertainment medium, it's the one that hasn't changed in the longest amount of time. And I think there's a reason for that.
Yeah. As a side topic, because we do got to wrap up here. We kind of touched on this. It's not related to WandaVision or anything else like that, but movies are kind of in a weird spot right now. They're starting to open up and starting to go back to work. I know like some movies are actually open now. Like you can go see like Raya and the Last Dragon, and it'd be relatively safe, at least here in the States. So the question I have to ask is, right now the movie industry is kind of in shambles, at least in terms of theaters. James and Sam and the rest and myself later. What do you think needs to happen to kind of get the theater industry back on its feet? Completely. I know, James, you kind of hearkened on it a little bit in terms of what you think like needs to come out to get it back on. But is there anything else you think needs to happen?
No, because I think people have. I think people have realized that movies in a cinema hit really different, and you know, I know that to be the case because I watch movies all the goddamn time, and I know the difference between sitting down and watching a 3-hour movie in a cinema is a vastly different experience than watching it at home, because you can't go anywhere, you can't pause it, you sort of have to pay attention, and a movie can sink or swim in the cinema, and if it sinks, it sinks, but if it swims, then it soars. And going forward, I think we'll see a lot more. I think we'll see a return of 3D for a little bit. I think we'll see some gimmicks to try and get people in, to try and bump up movie prices. We're gonna need one big experience movie. We're gonna need an Avatar. We're gonna need something that's gonna not like set the world on fire in terms of box office like Avatar did. We're never gonna see something like that again. I don't think it's going to be something like 4D. I'm not sure. I think the content is there. The smaller movie houses haven't gone away in the way that people thought they might have. They are still there and they're ready. I think we might see the gap between. I think we might see the mid-range movie disappear for a while from cinemas. I think we're going to have massive blockbusters and tiny indies and very little in between, and all of those middle stuff will go to streaming where they have found a new home in lockdown. I think that's the big takeaway for me, is that stuff like the one I always go to is something like Enemy of the State, the Will Smith movie. Like, a movie like that nowadays would cost 4 times the budget it did. It would be an hour longer. It would have quippy jokes. It would be a movie it wouldn't just be, we've got $40 million, we're gonna make a movie and it's gonna be fine. There's no room for fine in cinema nowadays. It either has to be amazing or terrible, and that's why you go big budget or you go tiny indie. That's what I think we're gonna see, at least for a few years, until things even out again.
All right, Sam, what do you think? What do you think the movie industry needs to do, at least to revitalize the theater setup?
I'm not sure it can. I'm not as optimistic as James. I hope James is right. To be clear, I don't want to be right here. I'm just not sure it will revitalize and there's anything you can do. I would say a focus on a more premier experience, more comfortable seats, offer food, offer more drink options, that sort of thing. That kind of thing, like, or even dining tables, like some premium theaters have, like that sort of thing would get me in there more and more.
I would like to say, in response to that is becoming the norm in the UK.
That's awesome. That's fantastic. It's definitely not the norm over here.
Yeah, there are definitely more options. Yes, there's definitely more options. Like, I know here, at least in terms of theaters and stuff, most of the time it breaks down to, like, you still have some, like, auditorium seats or something like that, like on occasion. But for the most part, it's like you can get like a recliner, or you can do like a movie tavern kind of experience, and that's fun. But that's kind of what the breakdown is here, at least. I know for me, I think it's something similar to what Sam said. You have to focus on it being more of a premiere experience. I know that, like, some places they have there's like a theater around here called Red Cinemas that it's like my favorite theater because they have a lot of options, at least in terms of everything. So what they'll do is they'll say, okay, well, we're gonna have our own, what's the term I'm looking for? We have like a smaller theater setting, so yeah, it's only 50 seats, but it doesn't take up nearly as much room, and they could fit, like, I think it's about 10, like about 10 of those smaller private rooms into one larger space. And it works. I think it works really well, personally. It seems more, you can show more movies in it, but you also have a more intimate setting. Because for me, that's always my one big complaint about the theater is that there's just a ton of people and they don't really care who's next to them. And just, it's kind of rude. But I think that could be a possible model, but that would require a lot of restructuring, and not every theater is gonna be able to do that, personally. I think people enjoy, like, their own more private experience. But anyway, that's my little shtick. Any closing thoughts? Hello.
I think we
I'm
covered a
looking
lot.
forward to Godzilla vs. Kong.
What was that, James?
No, I was saying I think we covered a lot of stuff. Sam, Godzilla vs Kong. Yeah, again, like that at home. Really?
Yeah, that's not gonna be nearly as
I haven't got a
cool.
vaccine yet, man. So, yeah. I mean, I'm gonna watch it at home. I'll watch it on my computer with a friend, like a friends on Discord or whatever, because I haven't been vaccinated yet. So, yeah. I mean, I would rather be in the theater, but if I can at least hang out and have some fun while I'm watching it in safety, then that's what I'll do.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm gonna watch it
actually,
at home
I do have a
someplace
closing
I can, but yeah.
I do have a closing thought, and it has nothing to do with anything that we've talked about this evening. But
Oh,
I
yes?
wanted to just quickly shout out something that's on Netflix at the moment. Now, I am a huge fan of Formula One, and I mentioned this on the show before. I mentioned that F1 2020 was my favorite game of last year in terms of, like, how much fun I had playing it, and over a long period of time. Last Friday, so 4 days ago, 3 days ago even, Netflix released the third series of Formula One Drive to Survive, which is a 10-episode docuseries following a lot of the teams and a lot of the drivers and the stories that F1 goes through every year.
Yeah.
I,
I don't hear him. Do you hear him?
I think we lost him. No, I think we lost him there. James, we can't hear you anymore. Your light is still green, so we know you're talking, but I think something happened on the audio side.
Won't say anything. Maybe he'll think we know about Formula One. Nah. Yeah, I don't hear him at all. I sent him a message on Discord.
No.
Any closing thoughts from you, Sam, while we wait?
Just that I really wish I could hear what James is saying. But I think we had a good discussion today. It's rare we get to go this hard into TV and film, like just on a dedicated episode. So I was happy to do that for sure.
Yep. All right. I just sent him a message to see if he can hear us or not. Okay. So what we'll do next week is we'll find out what James was talking about. At least the Formula One thing, something on Netflix. We'll find out what he was talking about, and we'll do that the first thing for his film movie corner and talk about that. So, thank you guys for tuning in to the Multiverse Show, season 5, episode 9. And Sam, where can good people find you, sir?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Samuel Tolbert. That's TOLBERT, and you can find everything I'm writing over on Windows Central.
Right. You guys can find James Wilson at James_S Wilson on Twitter. He's the good people and the bad people. I talked to him about wrestling and Radiohead. You guys can find me at Multiverse Show on Twitter and Anchorman V2 on Xbox and pretty much everything else. Thank you guys for